There are better ways of knowing if someone is going to be a good fit for your team and your job than expecting them to put on a performance and mask their disability as best possible. Change only comes from people saying, hang on a second, I think there's a better way of doing this.
Let's talk about it. Hello, everybody, and welcome to a new episode of Let's Talk About. Today, we are going to be talking about work and employment, and I am joined by Angelina. So, would you mind just introducing yourself?
Of course. So, hi, I'm Angel, or you can call me Angelina. I'm 23 years old and I currently study medicine in London, but I also work for the past 6 years as a receptionist in a nursing home. And I'm also autistic. I was diagnosed back in November.
Nice. And just for anyone who doesn't know, I'm Becca, I'm 24, and I have a chronic illness called ME, which stands for myalgic encephalomyelitis. So I am an ambulatory wheelchair user. So obviously today we're going to be talking about work, and as Angelina said, works in a nursing home, so we're going to chat about that. So you said then that you were diagnosed with autism in, do you say November?
Yes, back in November.
Yeah. So I'm just wondering, just to start us off, if you could maybe talk a little bit about kind of how your autism affects you, like on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, sure. So, for me, I'm very academic, and obviously, I can speak, I can verbalize my wants, my needs. So, I'm probably not what the average person would think of if you were to say to somebody, what is autism? But for me, the biggest sort of challenges that autism presents for me are to do with sort of social communication. I have always really struggled in social settings, particularly with sort of the back and forth of a conversation, knowing what and when it's appropriate to say things, interpreting people's body language, thing I it makes my family, my friend, and my close friends laugh that I have no ability to detect sort of sarcasm, irony, sort of if someone's hinting at something, it'll go straight over my head. I won't pick up on that. But also, and it's kind of both a blessing and a curse, I guess, because of the sort of the line of sort of study I've gone in. I'm a very sort of detail and routine orientated person. I have a very sort of strict day-to-day routine that I need to follow. And for me, I I've got quite a sort of a narrow sort of diet food wise of what I will eat. And I always try also, for example, I'll eat the same things at the same time, sort of every day. Um, but yeah, for me, I would say the bigger challenges in terms of my autism are sort of sensory things. So like loud noises, busy places, crowds, that kind of thing I find really difficult. Social communication, and then sort of routine changes, that kind of thing.
Cool. Thank you very much for sharing that. I think it's really useful, like you said, kind of with autism, I feel like there's such a spectrum, such a range, and
Yeah.
so I think that it's really important that we kind of spoke about kind of how it affects you
Mm,
because it is something that's going to affect everybody in different ways. So thank you so much for
absolutely.
sharing that. Talking about work, then, I think it makes sense to start at the very beginning without bursting into song from The Sound of Music.
Yes.
And start about when you first got your job. So I'm just wondering kind of how the process was of kind of gaining that employment and whether things
Mm.
like you spoke about kind of social situations being a challenge. I wondered whether sort of things like going for interviews and that sort of thing are a challenge given your autism.
Just a caveat before I go any further. I got my job when I was 16, but I wasn't diagnosed until I was 23. So,
Okay.
just a caveat, I was undiagnosed for
Mhm.
the first 5 years, give or take. that
Yeah.
I was working at the nursing home. So things might be a little bit different for me given that I didn't have that. But for me, I actually quite enjoyed the process of getting my job. And I was very lucky in that regard because the nursing home I work at is about 5 minutes from my house, well, my parents' house. And the lady that owns the nursing home used to be the head of biology at my old secondary school. And so they were looking for a new receptionist to work weekends. And obviously, it's a perfect job for students and young people. So she posted, had the advertisement sent to the local secondary school, and it was posted in the sixth form common room. And I happened to go into the common room on a break time to meet a friend, and I saw it on the wall, and I thought, that sounds perfect. And given I knew I wanted to go into medicine as well, I thought, that's also, I can put that on my CV. It's getting the right skills. So they asked you to email, so I sent them an email. And they sent me an application form back, a very basic application form. And they asked in the form, like, are you a disabled person? Do you have caring responsibilities? That kind of thing. And it was a very simple form, very clear form, which I personally found very helpful because I find forms quite hard to fill in because sometimes they can be very ambiguous what they're actually asking you. But
Yes.
that was clear. So I filled that form in and I sent it off. And then I got an email back from a lady called Katie, she's the office manager, asking me to come in for an interview with the boss. And I thought, I'm going for an interview, whatever. Turned up, and she just started talking about the job and telling me sort of what I would have to do on a day-to-day basis, what my responsibilities would be. Am I okay with that? And then she asked me like, oh, what's your like clothing size so we can get you a tunic? Are you available on these dates for training? And so what I thought was an interview turned out to be that they'd actually already wanted to give me the job, and it was just a sort of courtesy thing about giving you the information of how the job actually works, checking you're still happy with it, and then sorting out your training requirements and sort of the necessary paperwork they need. So for me, it was actually a very smooth process. And then the training that I did, I had 3 training sessions where I came in for, I believe it was 2 hours. It was basically trial shifts, which
Okay.
for me, I much preferred because I could show that I was capable of doing the job and could do a good job without having to pass a load of sort of social skills tests.
Mhm.
Through an interview, have to make the right amount of eye contact, be honest enough but not too honest, and know the right things to say, which I don't think is reflective of all jobs. Like, yes, as a receptionist, you need to be able to talk to people, but that's a different way of talking to people than an interview setting. So having it as trial shifts, I think that absolutely was the right thing to do for that particular job because you can show that you're able to do what's needed for the job. So for me, the process of gaining the job was actually really smooth, and I'm very fortunate for that.
Yeah. That's fantastic. Yeah, that's really good that it was smooth and that there wasn't kind of pressure to show kind of your social abilities. So yeah, so you obviously kind of spoke there that you weren't diagnosed with autism until quite recently.
Yeah.
So kind of at what point did you disclose your diagnosis to your work? Was it kind of quite quick? And also kind of how did you feel about that? Were you kind of nervous because I know that autism and many other kind of
Mm.
disabilities and chronic illnesses have a lot of kind of stigma, a lot of stereotypes
Mm.
surrounding them. So I wonder whether that, how you felt about that, whether there was any kind of nerves around that, and how you went about kind of disclosing that
Mm.
information.
So I haven't actually disclosed to
Okay.
my employers purely because I've never felt the need to in that regard.
Okay.
I'm kind of 9 months on from having my diagnosis. I've worked a lot since then, and I've never really felt the need to disclose because for me, I kind of I already have the accommodations I need purely through the nature of the job. So we have 3 people that work weekends, and we work on a 6-week rota. So we have 2 weekends in 6 each. and my hours are good. My hours are 10 a.m. till 4 p.m. and I can take breaks when I need them. So I can get up from the desk and go in the back cupboard and just have a breather if I need to. Like personally for me, I've never sort of felt the need to disclose my diagnosis. Not on a I'm embarrassed, I'm worried about their perception of me changing, I'm worried about stereotypes regard. More on the fact that I don't see a need to at this moment in time.
Yeah.
There may be a point where I feel it's necessary to disclose, but for work purposes, I don't feel like I'm getting any, I don't feel like there's any sort of benefits of disclosing. It's not, if I disclose it, I then feel more comfortable to ask for X, Y, Z. It's not really that kind of situation. But on the flip side, I disclosed pretty much straight away to my university when I got diagnosed. And through that, I was able to get sort of extra time in exams and to sit my exams in a smaller room that's less overwhelming. Because I study medicine, I start my placements in September. I'm able to get support to be able to get the most out of my placement and to be a productive member of the team. So in that regard, so for uni, it was worth me disclosing because it would make my life at university a more level playing field. Whereas for work, the nature of the job sort of provides the accommodations. So for me, I'm very lucky. The nature of the job has the accommodations integrated in it, and the job in itself suits me. So it's not like I need anything in the job adjusting. Does that make sense?
That does make sense. Yeah, that's really great that kind of the nature of your job is quite accommodating just as it is. Um,
Yeah.
I wanted to talk a little bit about kind of accessibility for hidden disabilities. Obviously, you mentioned that on your application form, there was a space to kind of
Mm.
put if you had any disabilities or anything like that. And I do feel like generally in the workplace and also just in life, there's a lot of emphasis on accessibility for kind of wheelchairs and things like that. Like you could say to an employer, to a boss, is your workplace accessible? And they could so easily just come back with, yes, we have ramps, we have a disabled toilet, and kind of
Mm.
not think about and not talk about kind of the accessibility for hidden disabilities. So I just
Yeah.
wondered, like, do you feel like on your application form there was space to be able to talk about disabilities beyond kind of the visible and the physical disability?
Yeah, I would say there was. Yes, there's always room for improvement, and I think there always will be. That's sort of the nature of an evolving society. But I think I'm very lucky with my workplace that I feel we are accommodating to disabilities. We do have a lot of accessible features of the home, but I think also sort of there's no sort of completely accessible space because access needs can be conflicting. For example, somebody with autism who's very sensitive to lights might want lower lighting levels in a room. But for someone who has a visual impairment, that can make it much harder for them to be able to navigate independently. And say a disabled toilet, having a toilet that's raised might be easier for somebody who uses an ambulatory mobility aid. It might be easier for them because they haven't got as far to sit down. But for someone who's a wheelchair user, it might be a lot harder for them to transfer if the toilet is at a completely different height to the
Mhm.
height of their wheelchair. So they might be able to safely make a transfer independently. I think, although I would say we are pretty accommodating in my personal experiences, there's always improvements that can be made. Personally, I do feel comfortable disclosing if I choose to at any point disclosing to my employer, to my supervisor, that I am autistic and benefit from X, Y, Z. And I think it's quite important to highlight, particularly for non-disabled people, that it's important for spaces run by them to also um, sort of make accessibility one of their priorities. I do think that in terms of when people apply for jobs, it needs to be clearer I think, what the job requirements are. Because personally, I hate the term entry level because
Mhm.
that never means the same thing on two different job advertisements. People whose disabilities affect sort of their sort of social communication and just people who might be anxious about applying to a job in the first place can be quite put off by that if they're thinking, particularly if they're looking for a first job or whatever, knowing whether or not they meet the requirements, if the requirements themselves are not clear, isn't particularly helpful. And I think also there are better ways of interviewing people for jobs. From my job, a trial shift was perfect. I think there are better ways of knowing if someone is going to be a good fit for your team and your job than expecting them to put on a performance to try and hide their disability and mask their disability as best possible and to show the version of themselves that the employer wants to see. Because it's like I was saying earlier, interviews are hard. It's you want to be honest but not too honest. You want to make eye contact but not too much eye contact. You want to sit in a certain way, dress in a certain way, wear certain clothes that you might not normally wear that are scratchy, are tight, are uncomfortable. And that doesn't help, that you're expected to read between the lines and know exactly what the employer wants you to answer when they ask a question. And a lot of the time, there are much more relevant and much better ways of finding that out from somebody rather than put them through a really uncomfortable situation. Not everybody can access an interview in person. And also, there are a lot of ways that workplaces can go to be accessible for disabled people, including sort of remote work and that it needs to be clearer. If a job is advertised as remote, you can't then turn around and say, oh, we want you in the office 2 days a week, because that's not
Yeah.
an option for everybody. Really, it's about making sure that your wording is clear and and make sure that the way that you find your candidates for your job is as equal a playing field for all applicants as possible.
Yeah, I think all of what you just said about accessibility is that's all really kind of great insight and kind of the idea that it's virtually impossible to get a space that is fully accessible because different disabilities require different access needs. But I
Exactly.
think, yeah, but I do think that a lot, as long as a employer or a place is kind of willing to adapt for different access
Yeah.
needs, that's kind of the main thing.
Hmm.
I suppose kind of my final question, just to finish off, would just be what advice would you give to if there's anybody watching this who has autism or another disability and is looking to find work? Do you have any advice that you would give them as they start that process?
Yeah, I would say don't be afraid to ask questions. There is absolutely no shame in in sending in sending a number of emails, in making the phone call if that's your preferred way to contact somebody, in using the online chat button on the website to ask those questions, to ask what's your interview process? What's that going to look like? What does the shift pattern look like? What are the day-to-day sort of responsibilities for the job? Are you able to take sort of breaks if you need them? How does like the break schedule work? Things that you would need to know to make you feel confident applying for that position. Don't be afraid to ask because not only are you asking to get information for yourself, it can also highlight to the employer or the person that's handling job applications areas where they can improve and things they might not have thought about that might be useful for employees and prospective employees to know. Because change only comes from people saying, hang on a second, I think there's a better way of doing this. And if you can be that person, wow, that's brilliant. But also, there is something out there for everyone. So being able to think about, okay, what do you enjoy? What skills do you have? And what are you comfortable and able to do? Because there's no point in applying, for example, to work in a busy supermarket if you find crowds and loud noise overwhelming, because it's not worth it to put yourself through that just for the sake of having a job. And I think it's worth really bearing in mind that Rome wasn't built in a day. It does Finding a job doesn't happen overnight. I got very lucky that the first job I applied to when I was 16, I'm still there now at 23. But I'm also looking for a job in the city I go to uni at, and I'm finding that more difficult because I obviously go to uni in a city. All the student jobs seem to be working in bars or restaurants or sort of service work. And I know from personal experience and just knowing myself that that wouldn't suit me, that
Mhm.
I would find that too overwhelming and it would be too conflicting with my disability, with my autism. And so I've said to myself, okay, we'll keep looking. Something will come up. And then another thing is, don't be afraid to sort of, if you've got a skill, if you've got something that you might be able to work for yourself from, working for yourself. But that's the beauty of what we do have now, is that there are so many different ways of working out there, and there is something for everyone. You just might have to be a little bit patient in the process of finding it. But if you do find something you think would suit you or you want to start applying, ask the questions, because there's no shame in being equipped with all the knowledge. Knowledge
Mhm.
is power.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so, so much, Angelina, for joining me for this episode. Like I said, I really feel like all of your insights and just everything that you said is going to be so valuable to so many people. So yeah, just really thank you so much for joining me today.
You're welcome. Thank you so much for
Um,
having me. I've really enjoyed it.
you're you're welcome. Thank you so much for watching this episode of Let's Talk About. I will be uploading a part 2 of this episode talking about work with somebody with ME, so look forward to that coming out in the next few months or so. And yeah, if you did enjoy this video, please do give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. And if you have any questions about anything that we've spoken about in this video, then please do leave them in the comments, or you can message me on Instagram and we will do our best to get back to you and help you with that.